There have been many ships in the Murder Drones community that have gone around. One of them, which is the most popular and the only one that is confirmed to be canon, is Nuzi. Now, if you are unaware, the Nuzi ship refers to N and Uzi being in a relationship. There are other ships that I know of, such as the Envy ship, the ship between N and V, along with some others like Vizzy between V and Lizzie. However, if you want me to talk about them, that would be in a different video, so leave a comment down below if you want me to. Now, I look at ships in one specific way, whether it be in a TV show, movie, or even a book, that being that it has to improve some sort of arc or the entire plot even of the entire story. I find it really hard to find some sort of ship that was made canon just purely off of fan service and to please the community. However, this does still happen. But overall, whenever I see a popular ship going around in a fandom or a ship starting to be made canon in a show, I personally look for a few things, one of them being which arc is it improving or which arc is it ruining, and how it affects the show in either a positive or negative way. In this video, I will be analyzing the Nuzi ship, how it affects the show positively, and how it may be the worst ship in the entire show. First, we have to start off at the very beginning of the show, the pilot episode 1. So here we are introduced to Uzi and N, however we are introduced to the idea of them being in a relationship, regardless of the fact that people in the fandom most likely still ship them together. In fact, in this very episode, we are introduced for love interests for both characters instead of being each other, however it is for Uzi being Thad and N being V. This will be very important later as I critique the actual ship. In the pilot of Murder Drones, the dynamic between N and Uzi is just being friends. However, in episode 2, it changes a little bit with them having more of a sibling-like relationship or interact with each other as siblings would. At least that's just how I perceived it. A lot of people probably just perceive this as them actually starting to get into a relationship or if just them being friends. However, this is how I perceived it and personally think is the correct way to perceive it, at least in these first 2 episodes. However, in episode 3 is where we really get to see the Nuzi relationships' roots. The scenes between N and Uzi feel like there's more romantic tension instead of just them being like siblings or just being friends. And especially with the prom-like theme of this episode, you can definitely see why people started to think of N and Uzi as being a potential couple in the future of the show. Episode 4 is a little bit similar, however it's a little bit different considering the fact that they are mostly just bonding as friends at this point. However, it's very clear that Uzi still has a crush on N. Episode 5 is a little bit more blatantly obvious with the N and Uzi interactions, even though they aren't really that good since I didn't really like episode 5 as a whole. However, that's a whole different video and I really don't want to get into that right now. Episode 6 is where we really get to see N starting to progress in the relationship himself with holding hands with Uzi as they walk down a hallway. Episode 7 has a very interesting dynamic between N and Uzi considering the fact that the Solver takes over Uzi, which forces N to fight her without actually killing her. More on that later. In episode 8, yes, there are spoilers for episode 8, so if you somehow haven't even seen the finale yet, what are you doing here? Just go watch it. In episode 8, there is a lot said with the Nuzi ship, with it just being outright said that N and Uzi are now dating.
Serious issue. Before that whole thing, we're, like, dating, right?
First, I'll start off with the positives of the ship towards the show. We'll start off with the fight scene in episode 7, and you know which one I'm talking about. The fight scene stakes were very high, especially with the fact that N couldn't really kill the Absolute Solver inside of Uzi's body, because that would ultimately kill Uzi, and he cares a lot about Uzi. Now, if Uzi and N were just friends in this scene, that would have still been very impactful. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to slice your friend's head off, at least I hope you wouldn't. However, the fact that N and Uzi are technically in a relationship right now that's beyond friends, at least currently in the episode or timeline of the show, it matters a lot more. It raises the stakes of the fight scene a lot more without taking anything away too much from the fight, except for Nori, but whatever, I just, it's purely shipping video, I'm not going to talk about that. There's also the scene where Nori literally slaps the Solver out of Uzi figuratively, purely based because she doesn't like her daughter somewhat hanging out or even dating a murder drone, which she seemingly is just fine with later. Again, you could also say that this is completely fine if they were just friends. However, again, it raises the stakes a little bit more and it adds a little bit of comedic effect. There's also the beginning of episode 7 when Uzi separated herself from N and what we thought was at the time Tessa. Again, this scene would have been fine if N and Uzi were just good friends. However, this scene is 10 times better because they are technically in a relationship at this point in the series. Uzi pushing away N, the one person who actually gets and understands her along with cures with her, is a very powerful scene, probably most powerful scene in this entire episode, which isn't saying much, but whatever. Now let's actually move on to a different episode, moving on to episode 3. Episode 3 is plotted to be one of, if not the best episode in the entire Murder Drone series. Now, a lot of people like this episode for their own reasons, however, the most common answers is that it's good in the writing stance and also a very enjoyable watch, balancing the two very perfectly. Episode 3 of Murder Drones is actually my favorite episode, and I think it's actually the best episode out of the entire series, not just my favorite. Now, you could also say that episode 8 is better, but that could just be recency bias, or you could think another episode's better. That's perfectly fine with me, unless you are a British duck. All that aside, what makes this episode so great for the Nuzi ship? Well, for one, it really introduced the possibility of the Nuzi ship. Again, the first previous 2 episodes really only introduced it as some sort of sibling-like relationship or friend dynamic. And number 2 is the knife dance scene. Now, the knife dance is one of the best songs in the entire OST, along with being one of the best fight scenes in the entire show. However, this is also where we get to see some interactions between En and Uzi. We also get to see some good character development from Uzi, where she says that she's done with dealing with things alone. This is literally a word-for-word explanation on why the ship is positive towards the arc of Uzi's character. It actively affects it positively, giving her character development, which is good. Now, there are tons and tons of other examples of the Nuzi ship affecting the show positively, however, I'm not going to get into all of them. With all of what I've just said about the ship being positive being said, I am now going to move on how it affects the show negatively. I'm going to start off with one of the biggest problems with it is that it kind of ruins En's character. Very rarely in the show do we really get to see En develop as this character by himself. Episode 4, when they're falling back down to the ground after En threw them up into the air, En has a heartfelt conversation with Uzi. This conversation would have been really cool for his character, however, it's only based for Uzi. Sure, there's a little bit of character development for En, however, it's mostly focused on Uzi. This is also focused on developing the Nuzi ship, causing it to kind of meld into development for both of them, however, mostly for Uzi. And there's also the entire glaring problem of the entirety of episode 5. See, this entire episode 5 was mostly focused, or supposed to be focused, around En and V's backstory. However, if you have any sort of intelligence in your brain, you will realize that that is clearly not the case. Episode only gave V like 3 lines, and she probably got less screen time than Jay herself, which is a somehow possible feat. And on the other hand, well, he does get character lines and actually develops a little bit in this episode, along with gets a lot of screen time. Again, he develops as a character a little bit. You would think that diving into some character's background literally would give that character some development, but En literally gets just like 5 seconds to process what he's seeing in Sin's basement and then just cracks a joke. But you may have one question: how does the Nuzi ship affect this episode very negatively? Well, it's the interactions between En and Uzi. When they're out in the swamp, they're having interactions, sure, but this could also be a very good spot for En to get character development. It's a big chunk of the episode that could have been used to actually develop a character that hasn't gotten a lot of character development up to this point. Yet they spend it all on jokes, interactions, and developing the ship instead of the arc. But that isn't even the worst part of how the Nuzi ship negatively affects the show. All the stuff I have mentioned before has been little stuff that I have carefully strung together and could be a little bit of a stretch, sure. But what I'm about to say now is undeniable proof of the ship negatively impacting the show, cutting out a large chunk of it that could have been used to be even better. Remember back at the very beginning of this video when I mentioned that Thad was Uzi's old love interest and that En actually mentioned that he had a crush on V? What happened to that? We actually don't know. It just got cut out of the show. You know why? Because of the Nuzi ship. I know, shocker. Now, I don't think a lot of people cared about Thad x Uzi. I mean, I also didn't really care about it, but the Envy ship was really strong in the community for a very long time, and they completely retconned it so they could have one relationship. Like, they didn't even have an arc. They didn't have a conversation between En and V. They didn't have anything. They just forgot it exists or intentionally ignored it. Now, the real reason this really does piss me off is because it contributes to the biggest flaw in the entire show: consistency. Nuzi's ship literally got rid of 2 relationship dynamics that were never explained, thought out, or even mentioned for the rest of the series after episode 2. The Nuzi ship contributes to the biggest flaw of the entire show: consistency, and I still can't believe I thought the ship was actually good. I have to give the Nuzi ship a little bit of credit. Cool, it's cute and it's I guess funny or something, I don't know, but when it actively harms the show, contributes to the biggest flaw out of the entire series, I can't really say it's the best ship. Ships are supposed to contribute to the story, add something to arcs, positively affect the show. Sure, there isn't no perfect ship. Yes, the Nuzi ship can be improved by so many things, by just not intruding on too many things. In fact, there's also a huge example in episode 8, when En is having a PTSD flashback of his time with Sin, and then it's interrupted with Uzi helping him out of it. That was so unnecessary. You could just have En bring himself out of it, like snap himself out of it, or just have him boil in that whole torment PTSD thing. That would have given his character development, but no, we had to do that whole thing where they hold hands and they're all wholesome and stuff. This ship not only takes away good character development from both characters, or just gives it to Uzi, but practically just fuses their character arcs together and makes them practically indistinguishable towards the end of the series. I used to be a very proud Nuzi shipper. I mean, it's the only ship made by the fandom towards the beginning of the show that has stuck around and has been made canon. That's pretty cool, but you can't just deny the fact that it actively harms the show. If you like the Nuzi ship and are literally steaming out of the ears because I've offended you or something, that's completely fine. I can have an opinion, you can have an opinion. I won't actively try to argue with you and change your mind. That would be just as stupid as Dyer's opinions on episode 3. Nuzi ship will obviously continue if the show ever has more episodes or more content in the future, and I don't care. It's sure I don't like the ship anymore after thinking about it for a solid minute, trying to come up with video ideas for this week, and I don't really care what happens with it in the future as long as it improves and actually adds stuff to the story, even more than it already has, and doesn't take away anything more. So if the Nuzi ship continues in future Murder Drones content, if there is any, that's fine. Congratulations. I don't know what to say to that. Well, I can't just sit by and just pretend to say that Nuzi is still a good ship, because it's not. With the worst ship, probably not. I've seen some pretty bad ships in the Murder Drones fandom. But is it a bad ship? Sadly, in my opinion, I do think it is. There is so much potential with this ship, and I feel like that it was just thrown out the window, and it was done completely horribly. Anyway, if you like the video, leave a like. If you absolutely hate me now, leave a comment, because that will boost my video. Subscribe if you want to see more Murder Drones content and indie animation content, and stay tuned.